You feel it at the edge of every conversation. A shift, not in volume, there's no shouting. A shift in tonality, posture, in the way your body tenses at her gaze. You fear you said something wrong again. You're already rewinding. Did I upset her? Echoes inside. Her voice isn't loud, but you already tightened. You've learned the kill switch. It's emotional, it's silent, and it works. This isn't ancient patriarchy, nor some exotic tribal ritual. It's a modern dominion, feminine tyranny, and you're living under it. Fromm didn't speak of it directly, but he exposed the mechanics centuries ago. When power isn't held by force, it's held by manipulation. When power isn't in structure, it's in the quiet collapse of another's spirit, and you're collapsing slowly, willingly, right now. Look at your life. Her tears hold more authority over your weekend than your boss. Her sighs can reroute your ambition. Her mood determines your voice, your schedule, your energy, and you excuse it. You call it emotional intelligence. You call it love. But make no mistake, that's tyranny packaged in care, not leadership, not collaboration, indulgence masquerading as influence. She doesn't demand obedience, she harvests compliance. The one who stays calm loses less. The one who doesn't rock the boat gets rewarded with warmth. You're being groomed, conditioned to yield. This is modern power, soft but unrelenting. It's not about flipping tables. It's about shifting power with silence, with tears, with emotional price tags. You think you're protecting her, but the true cost is your spine. And here's where Fromm's insight pierces through. Authoritarian systems don't need chains. They just need obedience. And obedience now happens behind closed doors, in hushed whispers, in scrolls of your own value slipping away. You're not weak. You're not incompetent. You're conditioned. You've been trained to believe your value is measured in her peace. So when the temperature dips, the false default is to dial yourself down. Make less noise. Speak softer. Ask permission. Show your loyalty. All while the clock ticks, your core phrase, your direction blurs, your mission quiets, because there's no louder voice than the one telling you you're wrong, just for standing. This isn't old school dominance. It's emotional authority, the most effective kind. She's not pushing you down with force. She's whispering you into place with guilt, withdrawal, confusion, expectation. So what you call compromise, that's compliance. What you call love, that's leash. Your life isn't a collaboration, it's a strategy. And every day you choose someone else's peace over your own presence. This ends now, because you can't wake up splitting your attention between her feelings and your truth, because your nerve ends have been rewired to respond first to her gestured disappointment, because every time you bend for her comfort, her grip on your future tightens. This isn't love, it's domination. And only you can choose to resist. You used to hear your own voice in the silence. You used to walk into a room and know what you stood for before anyone gave you feedback. But now, you speak and you watch her face. You move and you wait for her response. You hesitate, you filter, you shrink. That's not maturity, that's erasure. And it didn't happen all at once. It was trained, slowly, over years of emotional negotiations, of moods used like weapons, of softness demanded as currency, of you trading instinct for intimacy and calling that love. Fromm warned, man's greatest danger isn't the loss of power, it's the loss of self-direction. You were not born indecisive, you were made that way. You were taught that being good meant being malleable, that harmony was holy, that challenge was toxic. So now you second-guess your desires. You underplay your certainty. You pre-apologize for ambition. And every time you do, you disconnect from the man inside, the one who was meant to govern, not request permission. This is how matriarchal authority replaces masculine order. Not by force, but by guilt. You're not told what to do. You're simply made to feel bad for wanting more, for being direct, for saying no, for needing space, for holding the line, for leading without explanation. You used to trust your gut. Now you audit it. You used to name what you saw. Now you soften it. You used to choose discomfort over distortion. Now you keep the peace and pay for it in silence. This isn't just about women. It's about a culture built on emotional management as virtue, where sensitivity is currency, where fragility holds moral weight. And you, as a man, are asked to bend, defer, yield, because standing tall might hurt feelings. But the truth? She doesn't want a man who folds to her moods. She doesn't trust a man who loses himself trying to avoid conflict. She doesn't respect a man whose compass spins every time she disapproves. She tests you because she wants to find your edge. She presses because she needs to know it exists. But you failed the test the moment you let her emotions run your life. That's the slow death Fromm warned of. A man who seems whole, seems functional, but is spiritually neutered. Not by war, not by trauma, but by the seductive pressure to be less threatening, more cooperative, easier to love. This isn't adaptation. This is collapse. You've replaced masculine authority with emotional allegiance, and you feel it because nothing you do ever feels enough. No gesture earns peace. No compliance guarantees affection. The rules keep changing. The target moves. And your soul starts asking the question you've been too afraid to say out loud. What if I'm not supposed to be this soft? The answer, you're not. Because softness without strength isn't noble. It's just obedience in a prettier costume. And it's killing you. You think you're being noble. You think you're being mature. You're not yelling. You're not storming out. You're listening. You're adapting. You're nodding, even when your stomach tightens and your throat clenches. But that feeling in your body isn't empathy. It's betrayal of yourself. Fromm said the modern man isn't broken by oppression. He's broken by agreement. You're not shackled by a system. You're shackled by your own compliance. You signed the emotional contract. I will silence myself if it keeps the peace. But what peace? A home where she smiles while you shrink. A relationship where you're loved more when you disappear. That's not peace. That's exile. And here's the part most men never admit. You chose this. You chose the version of yourself that smiles while you suffocate. Because it was easier. Because confrontation scared you more than collapse. Because you thought that if you just got soft enough, small enough, agreeable enough, she'd finally relax. She didn't. Because she can't relax next to a man who won't hold frame. She wants safety, but not the kind you think. Not emotional servitude. Not yes dear softness. She wants the kind of safety that comes from knowing you won't fold under pressure. From knowing that even when she throws emotional fire at you, you won't turn to ash. But you folded. Again. And you hated yourself for it. Again. You betrayed your gut, your voice, your values, and then wondered why the respect vanished. You think she left because you weren't nice enough. You think she drifted because you couldn't decode her feelings fast enough. Number she left because she couldn't see you anymore. Fromm saw this decades before it became a cultural epidemic. When emotional manipulation becomes virtue, men stop fighting back. Not because they're cowards, but because they're confused. You thought being a good man meant making her feel better. But that's not masculinity. That's emotional labor dressed up as love. You became her fixer, her therapist, her emotional sponge. And somewhere along the way, you stopped being her man. This system rewards that. The world calls you emotionally available, safe, in touch. But you know the truth. You're not safe. you're suppressed. You're not available. You're desperate. You're not in touch. You're exhausted from absorbing feelings that aren't even yours. You've given everything except the one thing that could change it all. Your unapologetic presence. Not your silence. Not your sacrifice. Your presence. The you that stands tall even when she storms off. The you that speaks truth even if she tears up. The you that doesn't apologize just because she got uncomfortable. You think being hard is outdated, but softness hasn't saved you. You think being emotionally tuned in makes you a better man, but it's made you invisible, replaceable, disrespected. Not because feelings are weak, but because you made them your compass. They were supposed to be information, not your North Star. She'll never say it directly. She won't sit you down and explain what she's doing, but you feel it, don't you? The subtle mood swings, the quiet punishments, the sudden emotional ice that follows your decisions. She's not just reacting, she's testing. And no, it's not because she's cruel. It's because deep down she wants to know one thing. Can you hold your center when she can't? Fromm understood this dynamic long before modern relationships became emotional hostage situations. He saw how power shifted from structure to emotion, from father to mother, from authority to sentiment. And in that shift, the man stopped being tested by war or purpose. He started being tested by her moods. This is the matriarchal trap, where your entire masculine value is measured by your ability to soothe, to soften, to stabilize her. And when you fail, even once, the punishment is cold, silent, psychological. You lose connection, affection, intimacy. You start dancing for it again. You start fixing. You start proving you're safe. But you don't need to prove safety. You need to prove solidity. She doesn't crave a man who reacts every time she pulls back. She craves a man who doesn't need to chase her storm because he's building something greater than her weather. You've confused emotional attentiveness with leadership. You've mistaken reactivity for love. You've let her shape your frame. And every time she pulls away to see what you'll do, you do exactly what she hoped you wouldn't. You crumble. Here's the truth she'll never tell you. She doesn't want a man who obeys her feelings. She wants a man whose energy is stronger than her chaos. Because if she's always the one moving the needle, making the decisions, steering the mood, then she's in charge. And no matter how much she says she likes control, she resents it. That resentment is killing your intimacy. Not because you're wrong, but because you're replaceable. A man without a spine is just an accessory. Something to pose with, something to soften into, but not something to respect, and definitely not something to follow. You think she left because you weren't nice enough. Number, she left because you weren't anchored enough. You were too available, too responsive, too emotionally trained. You thought that made you her man. It didn't. It made you her mirror. Fromm's warning is now your reality. In a society where emotional comfort becomes sacred, the man who leads without apology is branded dangerous, and the man who obeys, rewarded with temporary peace, but no respect. You don't need her permission to reclaim your center. You don't need to be liked. You need to be seen. And a man is only seen when he stops hiding behind her emotions and starts building from his own. You've been living in a loop. You already know it. One day, you're centered. You hit the gym. You speak your mind. You breathe from your gut. She sees it. She pushes back. You hold. She calms. Respect returns. But then comes the slow leak. You get comfortable again. You soften the edge. You explain too much. You apologize too quickly. You shrink to keep the rhythm smooth. You think, why disturb what's finally working? But what you forget is that your comfort is what killed it the first time. Fromm called it the great seduction of false peace. The world tells you you've matured. But what really happened is you got tired of her disapproval, so you defaulted back into compliance. You called it balance, you called it compromise, but inside, you know it was collapse. That loop doesn't break by being a little more assertive. It breaks by rewiring your entire response system, because right now, your nervous system is still owned by her moods, still wired to her tone, still programmed to fear the silent treatment more than your own disintegration. This is deeper than willpower. You can't outthink this. You have to retrain yourself. How you breathe when she shifts, how you move when she withdraws, how you speak when she cries, how you stay when you're tempted to appease. You're not in a relationship, you're in a feedback system. And that system only changes when you become unshakable. Not through numbness, but through presence. Not by ignoring her, but by no longer being governed by her. You don't flinch, you don't collapse, you don't beg, you don't fix, you remain. And that remaining, that's what she's always been looking for. Not a savior, not a servant, a sovereign. A man who doesn't adjust his core just because her weather turned cold. A man who stays on mission no matter what climate rolls in. You thought being calm made you emotionally intelligent, but you weren't calm. You were compromised. That's why it never stuck. That's why she kept testing, because something in you still signaled weakness, still broadcasted, if you push, I'll bend. And when she felt that signal, even subconsciously, the game began again. You have to cut the cord. No more cycles, no more recovery strategies, no more pre-apologies for who you are. You show up rooted, decisive, not because you rehearsed a line, but because you've trained your system to no longer panic at the sound of feminine disapproval. That's what power looks like now. Not aggression, not withdrawal, regulation. You train that in stillness, in pressure, in choosing discomfort, in staring into the eyes of her storm and remembering who you are. She won't say it, but she's been waiting for you to do exactly that. And when you finally do, she either levels up to meet you or fades out. But either way, you're free. You've been told your power is dangerous, that your leadership is outdated, that your confidence is threatening. And every time you bought into it, a piece of you went silent. But here's what you know deep in your bones. No woman will ever feel safe around a man who's lost his fire. You tried to be gentle. You tried to be emotionally fluent. You tried to be soft, to meet her halfway, to take the emotional punches without making a scene. And where did it get you? Resentment, rejection, misunderstood, and worst of all, erased. This is the final mask to rip off. You weren't just manipulated. You were voluntarily ruled. You let her feelings define your value. You let her disappointment become your leash. You gave up your posture just to keep her approval. You knew it was wrong. You felt it every time your spine wanted to straighten. But you told yourself it was love. You thought surrender was maturity. But surrender, when demanded by silence and guilt, is not love. It's slavery. Fromm called it the psychological seduction of authority cloaked in care. And now you see it clearly. The new tyrant doesn't wear armor. She wears vulnerability. She uses need instead of weapons. Her power isn't domination by decree. It's domination by dependence. And if you don't reclaim your authority, you'll die with her hand on your shoulder, whispering, "Don't be so selfish," while your soul rots from silence. So what now? Now you cut the performance. You stop curating yourself for her comfort. You stop performing emotional tricks for temporary affection. You stop apologizing for your clarity. You stop swallowing your instincts just to preserve the illusion of harmony. Because harmony bought with your voice isn't peace, it's decay. The man she respects, the man she desires, isn't the one who panders. It's the one who leads. without flinching, without seeking validation, without losing his center when tested. You are that man, but only if you choose to be. Not once, every day, in every breath, in every moment she tries to reroute your power back to her approval. You stand. That's the new war. Not against her, against the training, the story, the internalized gospel of softness and obedience and self-erasure that they called good masculinity. Now, if you felt this in your bones, if you're staying on this path, like and subscribe to the channel. And remember, you were never meant to be ruled. You were meant to rule.